Okay, we'll open the meeting at 6:31. Once again, this meeting is being broadcast live and digitally recorded. Anyone here for open session? No? John?
I believe probably the seniors are. I guess we've been asked to come in. I got an email from Jeff on the sign
Okay.
that was up there. I have to confess, I was one of the people who put it up because the chairman of my committee asked me to give him a hand. And the first thing I asked him was, has this been approved? I want to make sure the language and putting the sign up was okay. I had some questions about the language. It seemed to me that it's much to do about nothing. I just change the language and put the sign up, and that's all there is to it.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be a big deal. Some of the seniors are upset. They think that it's a reversal. And it is in a way. If I were planning a campaign to get a senior center going, I think the people that see that as a victory for them, and it gives them, emboldens them. I've been on a number of committees. I started with the building committee that you folks appointed me to, long-range facility planning, and now again the building committee. And frankly, I appreciate the fact that we have this room next door, but I've educated myself. It is not a senior center. It's a place for seniors to gather. There's so much that we can't do in there. Doc, you've been in there to speak about blood pressure, etc. Nothing else can go on while that program is on. So I think I'm suggesting perhaps to the cable committee that we do a tour of and show them the facility as it is. They've been invited in there many, many times with locals. We go out of our way to get the public in there. I think they have to experience it with lots going on. Come in on Egg Day or something of that sort. We just had to ask the country hen for more eggs because seniors were coming in at 11:30, 12 o'clock, and all the eggs were gone, 90 dozen. And when I mentioned it to the lady from Country Hen, Claudia, and myself, she was right back with another, I don't know how many, dozen eggs, and it took care of the additional people. So there's a lot of folks coming in. The eggs are a great draw, there's no question about that. But we can't do an awful lot in that. I left the Council on Aging to start a Friends of the Senior Center, which most senior centers have now. We got about 50 members or so. And to my surprise, a number of them have 3 levels of membership. You know, the individual membership is only $5, family membership $25, and a life membership for $100. I've got quite a few people gave me $100 life membership, so they're invested in this. And we've got to make a better case on why we need a new senior center. We really don't. It isn't new. It's a senior center. This is not a senior center. Claudia works, I don't know how many hours a week, but much more than the 8 hours that she gets recompense for. The committee asked me to go take a look at West Brookfield, which was a small senior center. I went there and I found an assistant director that gets 20 hours a week and a director that gets 30. That's 50 hours of supervision in a small senior center, true. We get a total of 8 hours. So a lot of programs we can't put on. I'm hoping as Friends of the Senior Center, no matter where the senior center operates from, here or up the road, we'll be able to develop enough money to fund programs and do something in there. I don't know what to kind of separate that. When we have people come in to check our feet, they do it out in the open. Hearing, we went over to the conference room in the library, and I'm hoping we can do a little something. We've been affiliated with the Community Foundation of North Worcester County, which is the United Way Foundation. It was developed with a grant from a gentleman in Harvard, gave them $1 million. There's probably 150 organizations in North Central Massachusetts that belong to that. They take care of the 501c3, sending the letters to people who give us money. I'm concerned when I start looking for grants, and the grantors are gonna say to me, what kind of skin does the town of Hubbardston have in the game? And I have to say, just what I mentioned to you folks, that's what skin we have in the game. The next door, we're happy to have it. I can't imagine where we would be if we didn't have that room. But it has a lot of limitations. From my point of view, and I've educated myself in what senior center should have. My wife often tells the story up until 7 years ago, I wasn't old enough to go to a senior center. I was 83 a couple of weeks ago. So that's an issue, you know, with people. But there's a lot, I wish I could tell you the number of, several people have come to me and said, this place saved my life. One lady who used to live in Barry, lives in Hubbardston now. Her husband died. She went to live with her son and daughter-in-law and 3 grandkids. They go to school the grandkids go to school during the day. Her son and daughter-in-law go to work, and she was all alone going crazy until she got introduced to the senior center. It's like a family over there, you know. And I know everybody else that's over there are concerned about their neighbors, how they are. If they don't show up for a few days, we're calling them on the phone, trying to find out who they are, how they are. We visit people. That's another position that we probably could fund if, once we start generating some money, is an outreach worker. We're lucky to have somebody that was a certified social worker who came out of state service, and we go visiting some of our neighbors who have problems, but there's so much more we could do, and I just wanted to bring that up, that there's a lot of frustration. We know what we could be doing, what we should be doing, but we don't have the facility to do it.
I think what I wanted to just talk a little bit about was I heard that you were thinking of maybe not putting the senior center on the June ballot, the article, that we might not, that you maybe don't think it's time, or
I had mentioned that, and there was no vote taken on it, and what I was saying was that I want this to be a successful campaign, and my concern is that you know, we're now 8 weeks away from the vote in June, and is there been a sufficient ground game? The building committee hasn't officially come forward whether yes or no, and my concern was, are we rushing the fact, are we gonna try to get it on the June ballot but not have a plan for the ground game, and are we gonna rush it and then kind of squander another opportunity, and are we better off waiting till maybe the November election and get a good 4 or 5 months of a strong ground game? So it was a question. It wasn't a concern that we're gonna put it on the ballot.
I'm not angry, excuse me, I'm not angry or anything about that. I just need to know what my next step will be. I wanted to be able to understand if we decide to delay it, I need to be able to be the spokesperson to my seniors
Well,
and
that's
tell
what,
them why.
I think we were
So
waiting
that
for the
was-
building committee to come forward with a recommendation. So it was simply a question of, is there enough time or not right now?
And let me add to that too. So we're close as a building committee. There's several of us here who are part of that, and we're close to that recommendation. The reason we haven't done it yet is because we haven't had the full design and the full estimate, and we did not want to go through wasting anybody's time without the full answer. And we hadn't had the cost estimate yet. We'll just be getting this, I think, this Friday, so we'll have that information. But I've been thinking a lot about what Michael had mentioned last time as well, and is it the right time? And since that last meeting we had, been thinking about November election. There's also a September primary election, the first week of September. So there's an idea of maybe having a special town meeting a week before that to have this on, so that the vote can be during the primary as well. So it's still sort of being developed. I just want to make sure that we are able to present to the town the plan, which we didn't do last time. And in 6 to 8 weeks, without even having the full estimate and all that stuff yet, it's tight right now.
I agree with that, and I think that this time would be better if we did all work together on this. And so the more I understand what's going on, the better it is to talk with my seniors and all work together.
Yeah, 'cause I think,
mean,
you know-
if we decided to delay it, I don't have a problem.
And just so you know, there's no, like, sort of behind the, this is the first time we talked about it last, which I'm glad you came in,
Well,
because this
that's
is the
why
first time we talked about
I
it.
had heard from the seniors that maybe did you talk about it at the last selectmen's meeting or
We, the
something?
only thing we
I don't
came
know.
up, it was me, the only thing that came up was we were talking a little bit about the warrant or the budget or something along the lines of the annual town meeting, and my question was that are we better off delaying the vote because it's really cutting it close, and I want this to be successful. There's only so many times you can go before the town where people say, forget it, we've told you no enough times. So that was what came up last week, was are we better off delaying this for a few months and getting a nice solid ground game and presentation, and, cause the building committee's worked really hard on this, and with the architects, so I want it to be successful, and I don't know if,
As we all do.
I don't know if
As we
rushing
all
it
do.
for the June vote is gonna make it successful.
John?
But I'd like to add something if I could, and is it possible to relate this to the old business, cause the sign issue was under old business for tonight, but it's all interrelated, because if I may quickly, you had asked me to notify John, et cetera, in terms of taking the sign down, and when I sent him an email and I saw him in the parking lot, as he indicated to us, he was helpful in putting the sign up, but he was not the person behind it, it was Paul Hale. Because I came in here, saw Claudia, and I was trying to find Paul. I finally got a hold of Paul and spoke to him on the phone. Extremely discouraged. I noticed the sign is down. Now, was that the DPW that took it down? Okay, because after talking to Paul, it didn't set right with me in terms of the issue, because he was saying how it was their idea, et cetera, but he felt that he had the backing of the board and the administrator. These were his words when they put it up. A friend of his did the sign for free, for gratis.
Oh, it was just the terminology, Jeff.
Yeah. Please let me finish though, okay? And because I said, well, Paul, the sign's just got to come down so they can change the wording, and we want it to go right back up. And he said, well, who's going to take it down? Yeah. And I said, well, I'm just passing the word to you. He said that quote sign can stay there forever, as far as I'm concerned. He said I said, well, they want to change the word future to propose. He said it can be proposed forever. He's really discouraged. The point I'm trying to make here is I've been on the board now for 3 years, and in those 3 years, we began with the Long Range Planning Committee. I worked with these people for the last 3 years, John, Paul, Claudia, et cetera. And just in talking to John, but Paul, who was chairman of the Long Range Committee, they have all worked so hard on this. And one of the things that Paul brought up is he feels that by taking it down, et cetera, it is sending the wrong message to the seniors and to the town, as if it's a dead and buried issue. It's never going to come up again. And to talk to him, as far as he's concerned, it isn't going to come up again. He says you can put propose on it forever. He said, I don't think it's going to change. And I said, well, we want it back up. And he said, well, who's going to pay for it? And I said, I have no idea. He said, well, the man did it for free, and he said it's not going to be that way again. So he said the sign can stay down as far as he's concerned. Paul's basically washed his hands of it. I personally would like to see the sign get right back up in conjunction with everything we're talking about, because I think not only does it send the wrong message, because as it's very obvious to all of us here still, we need a senior center. They need a senior center. We need a lot of these things. I don't think we should be sending the idea to the town, well, the sign's gone, therefore the senior center must be gone.
I don't think we are.
Yeah.
I think we're going through the process of doing things, appropriately, meaning having, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna there's just as much feedback has come from other folks who have been opposed to the fact that not necessarily the sign is there, but the sign makes it sound like it's being built. So there's just as many people on the other side saying, we're not opposed to the sign, and people have come to this board before, and gotten emails and so forth to say, it really should say
Misleading.
proposed, or it's misleading. So I don't think I don't know, I think this is making a mountain out of a molehill,
Me
that
too.
we're taking the sign down to put up proposed over future, and it's going right back up. There's nothing
Well, I
trying
would
to
like-
deceive people.
I plan to do this when we got to this, but since I would like to strongly encourage the board that whatever little cost, I'm sure it's not going to be much at all, that there is to change the wording on that we absorb that cost and get the sign back up. Because I think it's a disservice to the senior people, the people in the long-range planning committee, because one of the reasons the sign was put up was at the time when we were hoping we were going to get this thing passed, et cetera, is we felt that a picture or an image had to be there for the town to realize this is where it's going to be. And it was the seniors who got us this land and did all that work. So I think the sign is more than just a sign.
It's a
okay?
corrugated plastic sign, and my guess is that you can probably get that printed for $40 or so. So I don't really think cost is an issue.
Well,
for that.
I'm saying, we brought it up near the end of the meeting last
Right.
time, and I had mentioned about cost, and the feeling then was, well, we're not gonna do it. I am now asking that we do it, because the people who were in charge, Paul, for example, he's done with it. He said the sign can stay there forever, or he's not taking it down. Obviously, someone else did, but he's done with it, so who's gonna put it back up? I think it's gonna be up to us to get it back up.
John?
Can I say, first of all, I agreed with your remarks, both of you, about delaying it. I felt the same way last time.
The vote.
The vote. Because I'm concerned, you know, that I know that we need to devote more time to it than we did last time. But secondly, on this issue of the sign, what do we say to those voters who are opposed to it when the construction equipment goes in there in a week or so and starts building the access road and drilling the well? Should we stop everything and send the money back to Boston? I don't think so.
Absolutely not.
You know, and, but those questions are gonna come up again. I mean, I've talked to Paul, and Paul's feeling about getting that sign up, and he went before the board, was that people would at least know something is gonna happen in the future. And it's gonna start happening if our building committee has anything to say about it. Those same people are gonna be just as angry, perhaps more so.
But now we will have gone through the process of, you know, approving the terminology collectively. We didn't really do that last time. As much as all of us are saying, get the sign back up, we just wanna make sure that whole process is, I agree, those people are still gonna come up and say, well, what's going on? They're gonna do that anyway. So we're just trying to make sure, kinda going back in reverse, pretending like we did the process the right in the first way and moving forward with one little terminology change. I agree. I almost think, you know, it went in the paper. There was an article about this. We're talking about it too. I kind of agree with the mountain out of molehill thing, even though I know how important the senior center and the work that's been put towards it has been. I don't want this to become about a sign.
It was more work than most people realize. I heard from a legislator just a week ago, if it wasn't for the bad condition that the state is in, we would have been in the works for a $2 million bond bill. And that's all been put on hold. It's good for 5 years, but I don't see it happening for a while. That would have solved all of these problems, but we're in dire straits statewide as well, as the local towns. That's not gonna happen for a while, I'm sure, if it happens at all.
John, let me just interrupt 1 second. Nita, do we have $100 or more, $100 at least in the Selectmen's Fund?
We could probably find it within the Selectmen's Fund or the Town Administrator's Expense
Because
Fund.
we can probably get this sign even printed on the internet. I mean, all of us have had campaign signs printed before, and they're really cheap. I mean, we can even come up with wording. We wanted to say something too. There was some talk at the last meeting of saying, you know, this is the DCR property that was swapped, or some indication that what this property is, and then site of proposed senior center, public safety complex, municipal buildings, whatever. So maybe we just spend $50, $60, $70, whatever it is, get the proper sign and just order it and get it in.
Sure.
I mean, it's an easy process. It's not, just don't wanna make this hard.
I'll second that, and I know it wasn't a motion, but I'll second the
Yeah.
idea.
All right, so,
So how about I will go home tonight and figure out, I remember what website I had bought signs from once before. Figure out the, a rough cost, and we'll shoot you an email and we'll get this taken care of. So you may make a motion to spend no more than $100 on a sign? So I'll make a motion to spend no more than $100 on a replacement sign.
Second it,
any discussion? All in favor?
yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Open session, anything else anyone have? Open session?
Anybody else?
Nope.
I just had a question. I've seen a lot of emails. I'm Tom Robinson. I've seen a lot of emails flying back and forth to our town council. And I remember being in here about 2 weeks ago, and I thought the town council delivered a letter about the permit authorization for this ground project. And I'm wondering, I can't figure out what the question is in front of the town council now. That one having been answered by his letter. What is going on? Why are there all these memos flying back and forth? What is the question for town council?
I mean, I believe it's whether or not the pit is closed, and that's,
Is that the question?
Yeah. That's what was said at the last meeting, was that Mr. Brown thought that it was closed.
and then,
Um,
so all of this correspondence as related to escrow payments and, letters, some signed, some not. So I think that's really boils down to, that's the singular question though, and no one's really answered that yet,
Well, I don't mean to confuse the issue,
but I will.
but I will. Mr. Brown submitted documents to the Department of Environmental Protection in relation to this project. And I have here before me a copy of something that his party wrote, his engineering firm, Micro Waters wrote, submitted March 8th. And on page 4 of it, and it's a big, long document, but on page 4 of it, it says, the site was partially closed by New England Organics in or about 2007.
Well, here's, it's just, and I'm not answering for them, but there was a lot of other correspondence in there that might be just a portion of it was partially closed because another portion of it was going to be shaved down by a Marinelli property project as well. So that's why that terminology may have been in there. This is the sort of wordplay discussion that I see flying around just like you do too.
Yeah,
So
I just offered up because it's his words.
no,
It's not our words. It's all.
okay,
Just drop that off.
thank you. Anybody else? Open session? Gordon? Yeah. Okay. Agenda?
Okay, the next item is, has been submitted by the fire chief, Bob Hayes. You may recall that at the last meeting, we talked about the fact that he would try to put together a proposal for the ambulance receivables write-off policy. And this is only intended to, spell out what would happen if and when the Board of Selectmen determined that there are certain accounts that simply cannot be collected. So this is a combination of sample policies that he's received from other communities. He put them together in something that he felt was the best process for Hubbardston. And basically, to summarize this, it says that the billing company, Comstar, would put together a recommended write-off list for the department on an annual basis. The fire chief would review that for appropriateness, and then would present it to the Board of Selectmen for consideration for final approval of the approving write-offs on the certain accounts. So it's intended to be a 3-step review process, first by the ambulance billing company, second by the chief, and then third, review and determination by the Board of Selectmen.
Anita, do you know, do we balance bill the difference between insurance and the actual bill, or is it we just accept what insurance takes?
No, we do balance bill, so if there's co-pays that were supposed to be paid and haven't been, then those get billed out. And in speaking to the chief, most of the billing that appears to be uncollectible are situations where the patient has died, patient has moved with, without an appropriate forwarding address having been received, that type of thing. So, this is not to say that we're going to write off every single account that has some payable amount on it, but this is a policy in which establishes a process by which the fire chief and the selectmen would review the accounts and make decisions about which accounts to write off.
Are there a lot of them?
I don't have a number.
Gets it off the balance roll, so make a motion to approve the ambulance receivables write-off policy as presented.
Second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
We do have some appointments that need to be made tonight for the selectmen appointments. The 250th committee the chairman had asked that we have the board vote to remove one member who intended to resign, has never formally resigned, and that would be Flo Barbier. And then in her place to appoint two new voting members, Karen Butland and Katie Young.
Make a motion as such?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
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 Okay, then we also have appointment of Memorial Day Committee members. Jeanette, do you have the names of those individuals?
Right now, the only one I have on here is John Nason. I did not get the formal for the other person that Tom Coyer was talking about.
I'll make a motion to appoint John Nason to the Memorial Day Committee.
Second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
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 And then we have, for the Board of Registrars, appointing Marcia Howlett for a 3-year term beginning April 1st, 2016.
Make a motion to appoint Marcia Hallett to a 3-year term to the Board of Registrars beginning 4/1/16.
Second it.
Discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and under the town administrator appointments or wage authorizations, we have the appointment of an assistant plumbing inspector, Joseph Welch, town resident, and he would be paid as a contractor per the fee schedule.
Let's take these one at a time, Anita. These,
If you'd like, I can run through them all, and then you can do it in one fell
Sure,
swoop.
we'll
Yeah.
do that.
okay?
And then we have two seasonal DPW employees to do the cemetery and parks cleanup. That is Patrick James, he's a rehire from previous years, and a new temporary seasonal hire, Richard Clausen. Then we have for the police department clerk, we have Antoinette Walker. Antoinette will be replacing Melissa Richardson, who is leaving the job at the police department to take a job in the West Boylston School Department. Then we have call firefighters. We have one new hire, Michael Parker. And we have wage changes for Bennett Chadbourne, Jeremy Gosilla, and Mitchell Mabardi.
Now, are these appointments or these are?
These are wage authorizations.
Okay. So I'll make the motion to approve the wage authorization as presented.
Second it.
Discussion?
Actually, some are appointments, some are appointments and some are wage authorizations. So maybe if you could amend your motion to say approve the appointments and wage authorizations.
Amended as such.
Okay, second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Okay, that takes care of all of our appointments. The next item was the Community Compact, grant contract application, and I thought we were all set to have the board, authorize Dan to sign that today, but I received a late-breaking email from Pam Coker at DLS saying, hold the presses, let's, I don't know what's going on, so I'll wait to hear back from either Peter or Sean Cronin tomorrow and figure out what's going on with that. That's the, contract grant for the Quabbin, consultant. So
We-
we'll see what's happening there, but
we
no
did-
action on that tonight.
And we did get confirmation from all the other 4 towns.
We did, everything's set to go. They
To
were
go.
fine with Hubbardston being the lead community. So it's not on that end, it's on the DLS end. Okay, so next item is the budget.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
And some copies for finance. And one for Jeanette. Over the past 2 weeks, there's still been some working on the budget, both on the revenue projection side and on the expenditure side. I've met again with major department heads to look to see where we can create some additional savings. And I've created the version C budget, which addresses the finance committee's concern of trying to minimize as much as possible the use of free cash for the operating budget.
And we have B here.
So you have B and
Oh,
C.
you have C here too.
Yeah. So, I didn't even bother to bring A back onto the table at this point.
Okay.
I did review it though with Ray Ann earlier today, so basically, at the end of the week, I'll be leaving the town with 3 different budget scenarios. Once you do know what the Quabbin assessment is likely to be, Ray Ann will work with you to choose that budget scenario, which seems to be the best fit. and then help develop any, last minute tweaking that needs to be done based on what the board would like to do. So if we quickly go through, operating budget version B, on B and C, the only change that I've made, and this was to address,
From A.
the finance committee, excuse me?
Sorry, the only change from A?
From A, yes, is to address the finance committee's concern about use of free cash. So what I did was rather than use as much free cash, I am pulling in some money from the municipal capital stabilization fund. So it's still a non-recurring revenue, but it's not free cash use, it is from the capital stabilization fund. So that does change where we stand in terms of use of free cash for an operating budget. Other than that, most of the projections are the same. And I won't take a lot of time to go through version B, but what I do want to point out is some impacts in terms of these version B and C budgets. And for version B, it does have some major reductions on the police side. It has major reductions on the fire side and major reductions on the DPW side, and each of those has their own impact. For example, on police side, what it would mean, it's delaying the hiring of the 4th police officer. As you know, we had one police officer resign. We've been using part-time people to fill that for now, hoping that we have one of our candidate, younger part-time officers is going to academy, and the hope was that we could hire him into the department once he's finished his training. So this would be keeping that position open for a good portion of the year under version B. In terms of the impacts on the fire department, we've already talked about that. It would mean that we've reduced some overtime costs so that there would be one day per weekend that the fire department would not have a firefighter at the station. So if a fire call or an ambulance call were to come through, that would mean that we'd have to have people respond to the station, then respond with the equipment, and rely more heavily on mutual aid for that one day per weekend. On the DPW side, it's reducing materials, it's eliminating some of the line painting, and it's reducing some of the monies that had been in there for some of the extra seasonal help. It also impacts town offices by reducing the town hall office hours. Currently, the town hall offices are open a range of 40 hours a week for the town administrator, 30-hour week for some of the major departments, and then roughly 15 to 16 hours for some of the smaller departments. This, under version B, we would be reducing the larger offices down to 28 hours a week. And other offices would have smaller incremental decreases as well. It also still is relying only on wage rates at the same FY16 rate, so no non-union employee would be getting a wage increase. And for those individuals whose office hours are being decreased, then obviously there would be a pay cut for those individuals.
Are there any positions that now a reduction in hours has brought it below benefits?
No, for anyone who had been benefit is still eligible for benefits.
Do you know, not having ambulance coverage one day a week, do you know offhand if the police department did carry an AED?
I don't know, that's a good question, Mike, I'm not sure. I do know that the police officers are trained as first responders,
Right.
but I'm not sure if they've been trained to use AEDs. I'll have to check on that.
Can I run over and check with?
Yep, if there's anyone over there, if they're not responding on the call. Some of the other impacts to the version B budget is this number is still holding a 6% increase for the Quabbin assessment.
A only had 4, right?
It was 6% over last year's actual assessment.
A was.
Yep.
Version A?
Yep.
I thought that was 4%.
It was 4% over what was budgeted, 6% over the actual assessment, because the actual assessment was only $4,034,784.
Okay.
But what we had budgeted was $4,119,504. Excuse me, $4,119,504. So the versions B and C of the FY17 budget, that number you see there, $4,276,871, reflects a 6% increase over last year's actual assessment.
When do we expect to hear from them?
They are scheduled to produce their assessment by the end of April. Normally you would be voting the budget tonight. Finance committee had reached out and said, can we delay the vote on the budget? So your next meeting would be Tuesday, April 19th. So I was talking to Rayanne about that, and she will be reaching out to Cheryl Duvall to see what kind of number Cheryl can give us for the 19th, if any.
It almost doesn't matter. I mean, we're not gonna pretend like it's just gonna get cut in half or anything like that, right? So it's almost like we gotta start planning to move ahead with high results. So.
You know, I do know that, you know, obviously we're not gonna be the only town that's fighting the assessments. And I think that's probably what the school is dealing with, and trying to decide, you know, what the process would be in terms of whether 4 of the 5 towns do not approve the budget. And as you know, before, in the past when that's happened, it ends up with the budget not being approved for the tax rate set, you end up going into a 1/12 budget. And, you know, basically, the state kind of then takes control over, you know, the decision-making process in terms of what the budget's going to be and how that assessment works out.
Mm-hmm.
So, can't speak to how that's gonna play out. Anyways, the version B budget ends up being $8,169,161. And in terms of the ambulance assessment, as I talked about before, we did increase the projected ambulance revenues because of the change in the fees. So there would be roughly a $48,000 tax levy subsidy for the ambulance, which is, you know, it's very low. It's you know, thankfully it might be even less than that. We used a very conservatively low number for the increase in the projected revenues. It may be that you'll get much higher than that 173, and the actual tax levy subsidy that would end up being needed would be less than that. So then we go into the version C budget, which is much harsher, and specifically done so to ensure that there is the least amount of free cash being used as possible. So in this assumption, again, using some municipal capital stabilization funds to help offset that $277,000 of the capital debt that had to be pushed into the operating budget. And you'll see that by doing that, with the revised budget coming down to only $8,118,408, the amount needed for free cash use would be $19,255.
Quick question for you. On version B, the capital, capital stabilization account transfer of $55,000, in the notes comment, it says leaves the $75,000 and MSCA for next year. In version C,
That might be a typo.
okay,
There's currently in the reserve fund for the capital, there's $130,000.
okay.
So, okay. And originally I had wanted to keep that there because, as you know, through budgeting best practices, we should be looking to try to increase our general stabilization account each year. We should be looking to try to build up our capital stabilization account each year, and we should be looking to try to build up our free cash balance, unassigned free cash balance each year. So those are the things we should be aiming for. However, because this year we're tucking in the capital debt into the operating budget, it's kind of a one-time hit on the operating budget. You know, that's something that we really cannot work to build those other accounts. Although you'll see when we get to the warrant article that whenever I was able to find some unused balances from either previous stabilization approvals or capital stabilization approvals, we're gonna tuck those back into those accounts to help rebuild it as much as possible. So in terms of the specifics of the version C budget, we're now looking to cut town hall office hours down to 24 hours a week for those main offices, which are currently 30 hours a week.
So that's 3 days?
That
Or
yet
is
to
it
be
partial?
determined. So
Okay.
what I would highly recommend, and I was speaking to Rayanne about this earlier, I would recommend that there continue to be consistency in terms of the days, as much as possible, consistency in the days that the town hall offices are open. So for those larger offices, we should choose, they all should be open the same day, same time. For those smaller offices, if they can't be open for all 3 days, maybe they're open 2 of those 3 days that the other offices are open. Because if we're gonna decrease the level of service we're providing to people by, working on this stricter budget, we should at least try to maximize the efficiency in terms of making it easier for the public to come in and do their business with the town offices. The other thing that I think is really important is that if we're cutting our town office staff down to 24 hours a week, or whatever else it ends up being,
They're gonna go elsewhere.
well, that too, but that's a given. But what I was trying to say was, we need to actually have the town hall office hours be a little bit less than that, because the staff is not going to be able to get their work done in only 24 hours a week. So I would like to have some amount of those 24 hours per week with the doors actually locked, and I know the residents aren't gonna wanna hear this, but staff will not be able to get their work done in 24 hours a week if they're, if the public is coming in at the same time all the time. So if we could find a few hours, consistent hours between all offices where they were here working, but the town hall actually was closed, it'd be much more efficient use of their time for those few hours each week, and then we could be sure that they're at least getting the work done the way they need to. Some of these other increases, I wanted to note that, for the assessors, RRG, who is the contracted assessing service company, their contract is up. We're actually in the process of doing an RFP for assessing services, but they had said that please budget only for $60,000 for them moving forward, because if they end up being the low bidder, which they hope they are, or perhaps only bidder, they have in other times in other communities dropped down their annual assessment amount just to help out that community, and they've offered to do that for Hubbardston for FY17, which I think was a wonderful offer on their part. Some of the other changes you'll see, under the IT, we do need some new computers in the police department, but with this reduction, this does not allow for the new computers. So if one of the police department computers was to die on us, it might require a reserve fund transfer. Some of the other changes is that police officer will never get rehired. That position basically would get eliminated. It would also eliminate one full-time firefighter, which would mean that we would only have the chief and one full-time firefighter there manning the station on every shift. And so those days that the chief is on vacation or sick, that means that the department would not be able to respond to calls without waiting for either a call person to come back or mutual aid, or a combination of those two. It might mean that there'd be much more reliance on Woods ambulance for EMS calls.
So those aren't situations, if they're known, that a call firefighter could come in? Vacation's a known thing usually.
Yes, vacation, if it's scheduled and he can get somebody to come in, then it can be covered. But there, for example, if it's, a last minute thing, if it's a sick leave or whatever, or he can't get somebody to come in, then there's a chance that there would only be one person on duty. So there would be definitely diminished service under this scenario. And let's see.
But they also have the police department for backup.
And
So-
really no other major changes. There's, obviously a reduction in the COA director's hours as well. Other small reductions for others. Again, the library department will be under control in terms of where they actually make their budget adjustments. We have to be very careful with the library budget, because if we cut it too much, then we lose the chance for certification of our library, which would mean that our patrons would only be able to go to the Hubbardston Library. They wouldn't be eligible to go to any of the other libraries within the system. And I have increased the unemployment compensation line to 30,000 because we would potentially be laying off those individuals, so we need to make sure we have adequate dollars in that unemployment compensation line. So this operating budget balance would be $8,118,408.
Which is 51,000 less than version B.
Right, because even though we're dropping off 2 employees, it's not a dollar for dollar savings, because you've got to increase the.
You have to pay them unemployment.
Right, exactly,
And that's if they don't get a job right away.
correct, but we have to assume that they wouldn't.
Budgeting wise.
So those are budgets B and C, and again, I'll be continuing to work on those budgets with Rayanne this week. She's shadowing me for this week. So if there's any other changes, we'll forward those over to the Selectmen and to the Finance Committee.
So to answer the question on the police, each police car has a defibrillator and an oxygen tank, so they would be able to, if someone collapses in cardiac arrest, at least the policeman can defibrillate. You only have 4 minutes before it's too late,
And they're
so
still all certified to use them?
they are, yep.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the town meeting warrant review. And you have some extra copies for finance. So basically, this is the same warrant as we were reviewing last time, but per that email that I sent around, we do have one additional article that's been submitted by the town accountant. It is her request that you add another article for a new revolving account, and that is to cover the fees and expenditures associated with the new DPW temporary driveway permit process. So I would ask the board to vote to
Reopen the warrant.
reopen the warrant
Mhm.
for the sole purpose of adding this new article received from the town accountant, and then to close the warrant again.
So moved?
Take a second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
This version of the annual town meeting warrant still includes the articles, separate articles, one for the senior center
Mhm.
and one for the public safety building. It does not include the dollar amounts. The building committee will be meeting on April 15th, and they will then have the construction estimates from the architects at their April 15th meeting.
We're not meeting the 8th? We're meeting this Friday?
We're still meeting this Friday, but
But not
what
with
we
that
were
estimate.
told was, based on
Right.
what Tony had said, based on what the owner's project manager was saying,
Yep.
that we would have the budget estimates by the 15th.
All right.
No numbers on these articles.
So, those numbers need to be put into these articles, if indeed the selectmen still decide to keep it on the warrant. If it's not on the warrant, it won't, it's a moot point. I explained to Rayanne the process that she would need to take if they are on the warrant, in terms of working with the treasurer to establish a borrowing schedule with the bond advisor to try to determine what the annual principal and interest costs would be, assuming 20-year borrowing for both structures, and then taking those numbers and working with the assessors to determine what the impact on the tax rate would be.
Now, last time we did 20, 30, 40, we did all sorts of scenarios.
We did, but as you recall, the feedback that we received from people were that 40 years was just it was too long, so they wanted to try to keep it to a reasonable amount of time.
I'd still like to see that, though. I think I think we need to see those numbers. I hear you, but it's not a difficult calculation.
So you'd be asking them to run 3 scenarios.
So when, the senior center, public safety building, the 2 separate articles, what's the last date? You know, if the building committee comes forward and says, well, we're gonna hold off till the fall, what's the last date before this goes to printing, we can kick these off?
You have to finalize the warrant on May 2nd.
Okay.
So the next couple building committee meetings, just because I'm on the committee, I'm probably going to be advocating similar sort of things that I've discussed, and then very soon we'll be able to report back here.
Okay. And we're not doing a Prop 2.5 override for anything. That would be the school committee would be submitting that.
We have not received any Proposition 2.5 override, general operating override. The only thing that we have on here is the ambulance and the Hubbardston Center School fire alarm panel. And the capital committee had recommended that those be combined into one capital outlay exclusion article. And basically what that means is that it is a 1-year, one-time additional taxation so that the town can bring in that extra $275,000 to pay outright for the ambulance and for the final repair on the fire alarm panel at the school. At $275,000 for that 1 year of extra taxes, it would cost 69 cents per thousand on your tax bill. And in the warrant, I did add a
You did add that?
note,
Okay.
as Mike had mentioned. So that note does refer to what the impact would be to the average house, which
Okay.
is 226,000, and that was
Mm,
roughly
seven.
100 and
Gotcha, thank you.
I can't find it.
Page 7.
$155.94.
There it is, thank you. Then that's to what we're calling the average household.
Yep.
Based on the assessor's records. So it's just a 1 year extra $155 for that average home. Obviously, if you have a home that's assessed higher than 226,000, you would take that number, divide it by whatever your house value is, divide it by 1,000, and multiply that number by 69 cents, and they'll get a fairly decent estimate in terms of what the increase on your personal tax bill would be.
We had also talked about the $1 or $2 surcharge for the Rada Ranch.
Yep, but that needs to be voted separately. There's nothing on the warrant at this point that reflects that.
And one of the things when we did discuss that, I asked if we could contact the gentleman
And we have not done that yet.
just to see what his reaction would be on that,
Yeah.
because I think it's only fair to do that. Okay.
So those,
So if we have a special town meeting for senior center in September or whatever, that's something to go on there.
if you end up doing that extra taxation, that's additional revenues that would come into play. It wouldn't change what the assessment would be on the senior center and or the public safety building.
no,
It would just be an
no.
additional revenue source to help pay for it.
That would be
Yeah.
to,
Or no, for
no,
the
no,
town.
no, that would be to offset the cost of ambulance service and stuff on the weekends for Sunday.
Oh, okay.
That's,
Yep. But that won't impact
oh no,
the
I'm not, that's
debt
nothing to do with,
exclusions.
no,
Okay.
nothing to do with that whatsoever.
Okay.
I know that. But that was you said a law we had to adopt or accept, right,
Mhm.
for that?
Yep. And that's, other than that, there's really nothing else different from the other articles we had talked about. Just to remind you that we do have several citizens petition articles, on the warrant. One is for, approval of earth filling under a regulated process. One is for not allowing earth filling of hazardous materials under the definition of the earth removal bylaw. And then the other one is preventing, or is actually asking the town to amend the charter to limit, any Prop 2.5 ballot questions to once per fiscal year.
So that leads me into what we've been discussing here about the future of warrant articles related to the senior center and the public safety complex. Do we have any on this that would be classified under the Prop 2.5? Like this single $275,000 for the ambulance? Would that fall under this
Yeah.
and preclude us, if this passes, from doing something in September?
Thank you, Claudia.
What they're asking is that remember how last year we had the article that asked for the debt exclusion for the senior center and the public safety building? That combined article failed. So then we brought it back again within the same fiscal year with separate questions. So basically, the citizens petition that's been, submitted would prevent that from happening.
So I'm clarifying, the same proposition 2.5 vote.
Correct.
Can't do more than one.
Correct.
But we could have one here, theoretically, one in September on a different
On a
issue.
different item.
Okay, that was it.
Yeah. But just for the same thing once per fiscal year.
And those other citizen petitions on the earth removal and filling, that has to go with a hearing with the planning board still?
It does, yep. Anything that's zoning related, they do have to have a hearing on and make recommendations on the town meeting floor.
I have a question about the citizens petition that we were just talking about here, about the
That's the last article.
characterize it as the gag rule.
Okay.
Has anybody asked town council about the constitutionality of it?
All of this has been sent to town council. He has not commented on any of the questions yet on the article.
Okay.
Yep.
And my question for town council on this, I was just thinking of just recently, was it amends the charter to limit the vote, but is that only coming from the Board of Selectmen, or can a citizen's petition override this?
No, this would prevent, even if if this, as submitted, if this was approved, even if you received a citizen's petition, the charter would control your ability, so you would not be able to put this back on another ballot question because the charter is preventing you from doing so. You're obligated by law, if you receive a valid citizen's petition, you're obligated to put it on the next available warrant.
Mhm.
But if the charter's preventing you from doing that, then you would have to wait until that next warrant beyond that, when the charter allows you to open it back up again.
I mean, I see where this comes from, but at the same time, this really limits the ability for the town to do anything in an emergency situation
Yeah.
or in any situation.
Potentially,
Well,
sure.
it limits
Right.
my ability to bring a petition, and that's the point of that's the thrust of my question.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll get response from town council.
Yes.
Debated on meeting floor.
One of the other things is that, this petition, doesn't take into account that the way that the charter is written is that any suggested changes to the charter requires review by a charter review committee, who then makes recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and then it goes to town meeting vote. So I was talking to Ray Ann about this, there is time for the Board of Selectmen to pull together a quick committee to review this, and to make a recommendation on it in time for town meeting. But we also have an obligation to reestablish the Charter Review Committee anyways, because the charter does say that every few years it needs to be reviewed and any necessary edits or revisions be brought to town meeting to, modify the charter, to always keep it current. So, the question that the Board of Selectmen will wanna discuss is this something that you feel you wanna rush through with a quick Charter Review Committee right now? Or do you wanna let this go on its merits to town meeting as it is,
Let's
which
see
you're
what town-
obligated to do?
Well, let's see what town council says first.
Okay. Because
And
you
then
have the
decide.
ability to handle it either way. I mean, one of the, if this goes to town meeting as is and a quick charter review committee hasn't been pulled together in time, the discussion on town meeting floor would be, we haven't had time to evaluate it, charter review hasn't made set of recommendations, and then it would have to be brought back again before another town meeting. So, but we can ask town council to weigh
Okay.
in on that process.
I say just let it go on its merits on town meeting floor. At this point.
After
So-
town council reviews the
After town council reviews it. So even if this does pass, that's just, basically this is non-binding. It says you have to convene a charter review commission and then be voted on again.
The charter in itself does have its own process in terms of how it can be amended, and it does require a charter review committee. I'm not sure if I have the exact technical term, but it does require a review committee be established to review it and weigh in on that.
Okay. Yes.
Interesting to hear what the attorney says.
Okay, and then we also have the one article special town meeting warrant. And again, this is just to revise the FY16 community preservation revenue numbers to reflect what actually happened during the year. As you recall, when you begin each fiscal year, you're estimating what the fiscal year revenues will be. And Hubbardston is in a cycle that at the end of each fiscal year, you finalize what those numbers were for that year. So this is presented by the Community Preservation Committee. And that's it for the warrant review. Okay, the next item is the Suburban Coalition. Dan had asked that this be placed on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys read this.
I did, yeah, I agree with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's 95 municipalities. This is to fully fund the foundation budget. 95 municipalities as of last week, and then a bunch of regional school districts have also ratified this. So, it basically to put on the agenda here for us to join that, party to try to get what this is more money for our school district, and therefore a lot more money for our town to not have to do the cuts that we've been proposing here.
And the actual vote that you'd be taking would be this document.
I make a motion to have our chair sign the foundation review resolution.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the town administrator's report. First item is a citizen's concern that has been brought to the board in the form of a letter. Although I have let you know about this when I first became aware of it. We have a resident located at 5 New Templeton Road who's concerned about a culvert that was installed by the town in front of his land. He's concerned because he feels that the culvert was installed partially on his property without an easement, and that as a result, it's now flooding his property, which he had hoped to develop. He owns a very large parcel. He had hoped to break off a small front corner of the property for development for a family member, but he's concerned that this culvert and the drainage going onto his property is preventing him from doing that. So we've been trying to look at the files to see, is that a new culvert? Was it an existing culvert? Is it on his land? Is it not on his land? And unfortunately, there's nothing really available to help us make a determination on this. There are no plans in the DPW that show where the official edge of town's taking on the roadway is. There's no plans that provide detail on this actual culvert that was installed. So,
Last time I spoke about it, he was not happy, by the way.
yeah.
Conservation records were gonna be checked.
Yes,
do
we
that?
did, there's nothing in there. So, we look to see, with every, drainage type project, it does require, review by the Conservation Commission. But unfortunately, Conservation Commission, did this as part of a town-wide, DPW drainage improvement project. So it doesn't provide any details or plans for any of the specifics within the work that was gonna be done town-wide. Tim looked through the DPW records. The only thing that he could find were some Chapter 90 filings where we actually requested reimbursement for the use of the Chapter 90 funds for the work that was done. And the only thing he found was language on the Chapter 90 form that said culvert replacements. He also found that the contractor that was used for some of the work was Tom Larson. So he reached out to Tom Larson, and Tom said he thought that most of the work that was done was replacement of existing culverts, but he couldn't be 100% sure. Now, the landowner says that absolutely there had not been a culvert.
I live there, absolutely not.
There had not been a culvert on this property before. So, there's two questions there. Was there a culvert there before? And did the town just replace it, in kind, in the exact location? Or was it a new culvert? And indeed, is this culvert on his property? The only real way to determine this would be to do a survey of, the land, to see if he has any bounds that could, so we could truly identify where his edge of property line is. The other thing is that you could potentially ask Lynn Gothier if he'd be willing to meet with Rayanne, and or the board to, give you his take on what he recalls that project involved.
I think we should do that. And I don't know, just a quick little history, but he lives, take a left onto New Templeton, way up on the hill, and he's got another property that he wants to have potentially subdivide for his daughter. And it's a portion that he just hadn't looked at in years, and now that he looks at it, it's got a culvert, and it's flooded. So, but one thing he did mention to me too, and again, can't rule out the possibility that this would go into some sort of a legal affair, is whether or not we could take a look at it, whether, meaning us, DPW, to see whether or not there are some other drainage options for.
Could Tim divert that to
Right.
follow the high side of the road
And
to
that's
the
what
next?
the landowner was asking, that if we could simply just take out that culvert or block it so that the drainage doesn't go onto his property there, and just have the water continue down New Templeton Road to the next
one.
culvert, which outflows onto DCR land.
Yep.
The only concern about that is that, we don't know whether or not the other culvert can handle that additional drainage flow. So it might require an engineer to look at it and wage an opinion in terms of what are the drainage calculations there, and can that other culvert handle basically double the flow.
Okay, well, has Tim been up there to look at it?
He has.
He has.
He has. So Tim's done everything he can at this point in terms of looking at it, checking records, but, Tim's not an engineer, so he wouldn't be able to confirm for us, and, that other culvert could handle all of the flow. And Tim has no way of knowing whether or not just for a brief visual, the culvert that was installed, the head wall, basically is built into the stone wall that's there at the front of this gentleman's property. So one would assume that the stone wall was probably the edge of the property between the town's right of way and his personally owned property, but one never knows for sure. So it's really just a lot of question marks that are being raised right now, and so.
I think those are those are the culverts Lynn had replaced before the paving of that section. He wanted them in there for, I don't know, most of the year before they paved it, so everything would settle. Then remember we had some heavy rains right probably like a month before the paving, and Lynn pulled out, I don't know if he pulled out all of them, but he enlarged some because they didn't handle the rainwater that went down there.
I remember that.
Like
yeah.
a couple weeks before they paved it, he dug them out and put larger ones in. I think Brown did that work.
Yeah, you're right.
There were some invoices in the Chapter 90 reimbursement filing for Brown for materials, but we didn't see any
think he-
invoices for Brown for work.
Yeah, I think he put the larger culverts in. If I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember him doing the work down there.
Well, let's, I think whether or not, just because we should anyway, do that research into it versus we're gonna have to do it during some sort of legal process anyway, might as well just do it now and make sure we can have the full picture. And then, maybe I'll meet Tim down there as well, take a look at it and, see if we can figure out where to go. And then if that involves, we think that there's any merit to, in a couple weeks from now when we meet again, to potentially, you know, discuss some engineering calculations, then we can talk about that then.
The next item is Ron Burton from Ron Burton Training Village had reached out to Dennis O'Donnell asking if the town would be interested in having some of the campers do community project for the town when camp's in session this summer. He wasn't really sure what type of projects would be available. He was asking for the town to give some ideas in terms of projects that we felt would be beneficial to the town.
It's great. I mean, this is going to be a bunch of young bucks who can do a lot of work. So I almost feel like sending that out wider to a broader spectrum of town people to comment on it. So
we're televised tonight, so if
Oh,
people
yeah.
have any ideas.
Can they replace culverts? No, this is great. I mean,
No, it's a great opportunity, but we also have to make sure that, you think of some projects that'd be appropriate, because the kids, range in different ages, and, it could be anywhere from 5 kids to 80 kids, that would be available, depending on the project or projects that you might identify for them
Did
to work
that
on.
cemetery fence, did we need to paint that still, or is that done?
I think they finished that.
Finish that?
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever send a letter out of thanks to the people that did that?
Yes,
You
yeah, I
Oh,
did.
good.
Good question to ask the Parks Commission too,
Yeah.
'cause there might be stuff at the fields or the
gazebo or any of that
Right.
stuff.
Maybe
Did-
the playground might need more stone or, something like that.
They gave us a deadline, I think, right?
I think that Ron had wanted to know this week,
This week?
but, maybe we could give it a little bit more time.
Okay.
Pat, the fence on the other cemetery, when Hale Road comes to an end, when
Hmm.
you cross Williamsville, wasn't that one all rotted?
That one somebody hit, believe it or
That,
not.
that needs working.
Yeah, yeah.
So do we get it replaced with insurance?
No, because no one ever filed
Oh,
a claim with their insurance. It got hit years ago.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Who's in charge of Parks, is it Sanda?
Sandaberry's the chair of the Parks Commission.
Well, we should be able to think of something here. So what do you want to say? By what do you think they'll be okay with?
Maybe we could give people the week, and by next Monday, we'd have something
Sounds good.
that people could get, in touch with Rayanne.
Okay.
Any work in here that needs to be done?
I know.
Most of our work we had done by the
Claudia,
jail crews.
anything for you guys?
Oh, for us?
Maybe they can build a senior center.
Okay, next item, DEP, has their annual, Sustainable Materials Recovery Program grant, and we received notice of the 2016 program. They provide grants for basically any kind of recycling-related projects or equipment needs, so, I would recommend that the selectmen reach out to the Board of Health and try to coordinate to see if, what would be appropriate for the town to consider applying for this year. It can be anything for, recycling containers or, all kinds of different things. Some communities, in the past were able to receive even small dumpster, to hold recycling things at their transfer stations. So, I would recommend that, the town definitely work with the Board of Health to see what would be appropriate to put that grant in. The deadline to apply is June 15th. The health insurance opt-out program that the Board of Selectmen approved moving ahead with, because this does relate to health insurance, which is part of a mandatory, component of bargaining. I did reach out to each of the 3 towns' unions, police, fire, DPW. The, police and DPW have signed off on accepting the program. They think it's great, they're really appreciative, and we're just still waiting to hear a final decision from the fire union. But it's definitely generating strong interest. So, it might be possible to get 3 or 4 employees, involved in the opt-out program for FY17, which would be a help in reducing. I didn't bother to put all the paperwork back in the budget. It's
Yeah.
it's the same as what you've seen before. But it, that would definitely help in terms of reducing the FY17 health insurance costs. And then lastly, the Charter Cable License Renewal. The Cable Advisory Committee has met several times with Tom Cohen from Charter to work out the details of suitable terms and conditions for the cable license renewal. And the committee will be ready to recommend to the board at your April 19th meeting for that final negotiation phase and the details of that. So Tom Charter has been invited to attend that session. So I think it's very likely that you'd be able to review those terms and conditions and actually make a decision on the license renewal on the 19th, but you do have until May 30th to make the decision, so you have time, but it's basically ready to go.
Okay.
And that's it for the town administrator's report.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next item is town administrator transition.
I just, as you know, I just asked to put it on here just so we could sort of hear about, what the next week's gonna be like.
Yep. So, this week, Rayanne will be shadowing me. I think I gave her a lot of information today, reviewing all kinds of facets of documents. There's kind of helping her understand my filing methods, both for electronic files and hard copy files, so that she can find, where information is. Reviewing some of the key items that need to be addressed over the next few weeks, but basically it is town meeting and budget has to be the highest priority, because those are mandatory deadlines and have legal implications if those deadlines aren't met. So, we have the week together, and I think she'll be in good shape.
Okay. And then how about, union negotiations?
So we do have another executive session for the fire department's contract for tonight, and I don't know, we'll see what happens in that executive session.
But Rand's up to speed, or will be up to speed?
After tonight's
Okay.
executive session, she will be up to speed, yeah. So then we have committee updates.
250th, I think we just kept all these on here just because last week we had a update, but I don't, unless you have something to add for this.
Anything to add for it?
No.
No, really.
Me neither. As far as the building committee, we had, supposed to have a meeting last Friday, got canceled. But we talked about it earlier. We've got, I don't know how many plan sets and specifications that we're all going through, doing our own little red line versions of it, while in parallel the cost estimators are working for the owner's project manager and architect to come up with the costs so that we can see what the final dollar value. Right now, we have a square footage that, we talked about before, and how we reduced it down to what we thought could be the most, the smallest for an operational building. And, we've heard a whole wide range of per square foot prices that pretty soon we're actually gonna finally see a number. Because it matters when you're multiplying by, 6,500 square feet. How much is that again? 5,000? 5,000 square feet. That's where we started. It varies significantly when you're talking about dollars per square foot. So that's the building committee. As far as the QRSD task force, I think Anita went into it before. We had gotten to the point with the community compact grant, and finally all the other towns getting back to us, giving us the town of Hubbardston to be the lead to work with the grant money. They've accepted the scope of work, or close to enough.
Yeah, so the
Collins.
The Collins Center is willing to work with us. They are basically a state agency, so we wouldn't need to go through a procurement process with them. So Sean Cronin left it that he was gonna be speaking to Steve McGoldrick at the Collins Center to, finalize what that cost would be to the state, because the state is funding that consultant scope of services. So that might have been part of why Sean asked for us to not sign the contract tonight, because it did include a dollar value in there.
Okay.
And maybe that's not the final dollar. That's the only thing I can think of, is that maybe it's, there'll be a change in the dollar value of that contract.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, as sort of busy as things have been behind the scenes with that task force, it might go a little sleepy for a little while once it starts going over to, besides maybe a subcommittee working with the consultant, because they have to do a tremendous amount of research and data gathering.
There is a lot. I mean, there's several parts of work that the consultant will be helping with, but there's also some things that the task force should be working with the school on, and that's, getting some of the information about the potential school closures or school consolidations.
Mhm.
So that can be, the task force can be continuing to work on that. in conjunction with the consultant doing a lot of the data research.
So, which is an important thing, so that the task force can sort of refocus on that.
Mhm.
We've been working on this
Right.
community compact grant for so long, we've kind of got away from the tough decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
I just have a question. Congratulations on having Hubbardston take the lead. How did you manage that?
I don't know, we brought it up in the first place and reached out to them, and they all agreed to just kind of let us continue on with the process. So I think it's good because it, you know, as far as us sort of being the impetus for getting the towns together to form the task force in the first place, it sort of keeps the message the same, as far as coming from you know, this office. So that's really it. And the town center committee, I can't remember if I mentioned it last week or maybe they hadn't done this, but the WPI students, 2 WPI students chose us. So I will be meeting with them, with the DPW director, Monday afternoon to just sort of go over a broad scope. And I don't know exactly what their time frame is as far as, you know, when they would begin. We have a town center committee meeting in a couple weeks, which they'll definitely be invited to those and all the ones moving forward. But there's a lot of plans we have for them, and I mean plans, not like literal plans on a paper, but how they can contribute to this. But a significant one, which our committee really feels like, there are actually 2 former WPI students who are on our committee as well, so who understand how this sort of capstone project works when it comes there, is to see how the town votes on the authorization for funds for a schematic design of the reconstruction of Main Street, because that's where the WPI students will really be able to have something tangible to be working with an actual professional engineer, because it's outside their realm at this point to just kind of come up and reconstruct a town center. So you know, hopefully I'm sure they will be eager, and hopefully we'll see how things go at town meeting.
Okay, good. We do have a set of minutes for approval, January 25th, 2016.
Well, I sent them all to you, everyone I believe was in attendance, so.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 25th minutes.
Second it?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Under old business, we had 21 Gardner Road, the sign removal in new language, but that's already been discussed, so I think we can pass
I'm
by
looking it
that.
up tonight.
I have a question though. If you could clarify something that I think you sent out to us in regards to Route 68 project,
Mhm.
like there
Oh, the
seemed to
Malone
be
McBroom update?
something else
Yeah.
seemed to be, would it potentially slowing it down because?
Do you remember, this spring, there was discussion about some of the, drainage structures that were on Route 68 South? And some of the clean out that the state is expecting to have done, it goes beyond the easements that the original road project had. So the concern was that we had to obtain easements from DCR to get out there and get that work done, to make sure that those culverts were cleaned out and capable of working effectively for another 20 years. So Malone McBroom, who, you know, has good working relationship with people at DCR and DEP, took the lead in trying to get the approval from DCR to allow us to do it just as a side letter, rather than having to go and get full easements for this work to be done. DCR is fine with that, but it requires that they take the lead in that process. It's not something that we can initiate, they have to. So Malone and McBroom, they were supposed to try to get that done in January, it hasn't been done yet. So Malone and McBroom will just need to watch that very carefully to make sure that that actually happens. Is it delaying the project? Not really, because as you know, the state ended up taking the Route 68 project off the tip list. So we're trying to get it back on, but in the meantime, you know, it buys Malone and McBroom and Mass DOT a little bit of time to get that issue worked out with DCR.
You said it though, but we gotta stay on them.
Yep. Okay, then we have public and press questions and answers.
Hi.
So we were here, I'm the Monty Tech School Committee representative from Hubbardston. And this is Tammy, she's the business manager. We were here during the budget talks
Yep.
for any questions. And if there are, we're here, she's here. And, or we have information to hand out.
Okay. Yeah, love to see it.
And that would be great. I think, you know, one of the key concerns that we had was, it was a substantial increase in our assessment this year. You know, basically an 18.7% increase. But from the response that you gave me several weeks ago, it sounds as though the majority of the reason for that increase is because of increase in enrollment of Hubbardston students.
It is, yes.
Yes, and it goes with, so in your package, you have a copy of our budget and the PowerPoint presentation. So it goes through the whole process of how your assessment is established.
Thank you.
So really, our budget only increased by 0.5%, or $145,000. So the major increase to Hubbardston was the increase of 10 students. And along with that,
What did that bring it from approximately? Do you know? Like 10 from 50 to 60, from 100 to 110, you know, offhand?
Budget from 61 to 71
Mhm.
people.
So that's pretty significant percentage.
And so with the state, I'm sure you're familiar through Quabbin and through our assessment, that the state really establishes the required minimum that you pay towards that assessment, which is the major component of your assessment. So if I direct you to page 30 of the PowerPoint, I think you'll really see, it breaks it down very easily as to where the increase came from. You'll see that the state required minimum for Hubbardston, due to the increase in students, was the 93,878 increase. The other components for Monty Tech are very minor, the increases. And then you can see how much the town pays per pupil to Monty Tech, which for 17 will be 8,593. Our budget is basically at the required minimum spending that the state establishes. We're actually only $45,000 over the required. So we're at 100.2% in spending. So we're about as low as we can be for the budget itself. And again, and Anita reached out and I responded to her, but if there's any other questions after review everything, I'd be happy to provide more.
This is, and I haven't reviewed anything, so this is.
No, right.
But the, again, just thinking of numbers, do you have something that we can look at that shows the breakdown in Hubbardston students and which grades they're in? As far as when we would know how, and again, all it knows is you're not gonna know who's coming into the district or into your school at that time, but who would be going out of it and how that may affect us, because this was a very significant hit too. We didn't know it was coming, you know?
Yeah.
So, if there's any additional, information.
I can send that.
All right.
I have the breakdown by grade
Yeah.
level, not in the budget. We
Mhm.
usually just focus on the October 1 numbers, but I can certainly get it out to your town administration.
Yeah.
And make sure they get it to you so that you can plan. We did talk earlier to myself and the superintendent, who has a long ride, so she had to get going.
Yep.
But, we did say that we send out the numbers to the superintendents of who's there on October 1, but we kinda think it's a good idea if we send it to the town administration for your budgeting purposes. It's more valuable, or it's as valuable coming to the town for financial reasons as it is going to the superintendent of the other school district or of your school district to know. So we did say we will make sure we do that in the future. That way you know at least in January, that's when we pretty much, we could give you an idea of who's at the school on October 1. There's some changes that happen between October and January with the state, like school choice numbers get added and stuff, but you don't have many of that. So if we give you the October 1 numbers, that should really help you plan with that year's budget. Because we don't go up significantly. We only go up with our required minimum contribution, our net school spending. So we're not having significant increases to the budget, so it will help you plan going forward.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely, and like I said, please, we're happy to answer any questions. If anybody has any, you can get them to me and I'll be happy to send a response.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Good.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your patience.
No, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
It's an honor really to have the kids go to Monty Tech, so I know it's a big jump. But that means more of our kids got accepted, and there is a waiting list.
Mhm.
So our kids did well to be able to get in, you know, and, it's our future, so.
Yep. Okay, anyone else, public or press, questions,
Thank you.
comments? Thanks a lot.
Night.
I'm only sick, so if you can understand, you can just let me know. But, the last date for the, warrant is
May 2nd.
and the election will be June 4th.
7th.
The town meeting is June 7th, and the election would be that following Tuesday after that.
And for the fall election, it would be either November or September.
To be determined.
Okay.
Okay, if no other questions, we do have an executive session tonight pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Exemption 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. So we need a motion to enter.
Make a motion for exemption 3.
And with no intent of coming back.
No intent of coming back to public session.
Okay, second that?
Okay, we need a roll call vote. Mike?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Okay, we entered